Fall back! Everyone retreat to the vehicles! Move, quickly!
At exactly 3:05 a.m., the earth beneath our little corner of Canyon Heights didn't just tremble, it groaned. It was a sound I hadn't heard since my last tour, the sound of pressure letting go. And I knew instantly it wasn't a tremor. It was the mountain above my home, the one the HOA had spent 6 months hacking into without a single permit, breaking its back. And within minutes, everything I'd worked for, everything I'd warned them about, came down in a slow-motion tidal wave of mud, rock, and ruin. When I first bought that house, I wasn't looking for a mansion, just a quiet pocket of peace. I was fresh out of the corps of engineers, 20 years of knowing exactly how the ground works, how the water flows, how the wrong kind of clay can betray you. I had my daughter Clara, and all I craved was stillness, a place where the biggest drama was whose lawn gnome got stolen. The view was incredible. We were nestled right at the base of the Sierra Verde Ridge, the trees swaying like quiet sentinels above our fence line. The Canyon Heights Community Association was just background noise, rarely newsletters, speed limits, the usual petty bureaucracy. Then, the board changed. A woman named Brenda Cross swept in, vice president, a realtor with a vision, a blindingly bright smile, and a truly terrifying amount of misplaced confidence. She called her pet project the Pinnacle Promenade. It sounded beautiful, didn't it? A half-mile terraced walking trail right along the 40-degree incline above our homes, clearing the unsightly native brush and installing benches, elevating community value. She chirped at the first meeting, connecting us to nature. Nobody asked for it, nobody needed it, but Brenda announced it, and marked it approved. I didn't panic until the Monday morning the yellow excavator showed up. It looked like a giant metallic beetle climbing the ridge, its steel claw tearing out roots that were older than the whole subdivision. I saw the topsoil shift, the first raw, ugly scar on that beautiful green skin, and every alarm bell I'd suppressed for years went off. That scrub brush and the oak roots weren't just scenery, they were the hillside skeleton. You don't need a PhD in geotech to know that. You just need 5 minutes studying a basic erosion chart. I called the HOA office immediately. They put me through to Brenda. Her voice was pure saccharine, dripping with that condescending HOA authority that makes your teeth ache. "Oh, Mr. Jensen," she said, using my last name like a scolding. "Thank you for your concern, but we've consulted professionals. Everything is above board. That view is going to be stunning." "I already had a stunning view, Miss Cross," I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "Now I have a stripped slope, loose clay, and an operator cutting into the stabilizing root systems. Did you run a geotechnical survey?" Silence. I pressed her. "I'll take that as a no." That's when she laughed a short, sharp, disbelieving sound and hung up. Just like that dot, I stood in my backyard that night, staring up. The raw earth was exposed, vulnerable, naked. My training kicked in. I looked for fissures, for the telltale signs of subterranean water seepage, the wrong color of clay. Everything was wrong. They were trading physics for aesthetics, and that's a trade. The earth always wins. For weeks, I documented everything. Photos, timestamps, notes detailing the aggressive cuts and the total lack of retention measures. My daughter, Clara, caught me one night, bent over the laptop. "Dad, it's just a trail," she said, poking her salad. I looked up. "It's not just a trail, honey. It's weight displacement. It's water flow. It's gravity." I couldn't help but mutter that I wished I wasn't having the same sinking feeling I had before our convoy got caught in a mudslide outside Kandahar. The sound of metal crunching when we lost those 2 vehicles. It haunts you. At the next board meeting, I brought a binder, a massive, meticulously indexed thing with county risk maps and slope angle calculations. Brenda waved a color-printed concept drawing of wildflowers and talked about community cohesion. They gave me 2 minutes. They nodded politely, and the instant I finished, they moved on to the topic of holiday light regulations. The retaliation was swift and frankly, breathtakingly petty. Letters started arriving. Non-compliant fence height, excessive clutter, a folded top, a notice about a non-native fern Clara had planted for a science project. The message was crystal clear. Sit down, shut up, or we will make your life a living hell. But intimidation doesn't work on a man who's had to dig his friends out of rubble. They had no idea what they were awakening. 3 days after they carved the final shelf into the hillside, I saw it. The first fissure, a jagged, horizontal crack, running right across the freshly cut face. It had grown 2 inches overnight. That night, I compiled a formal incident report, professional, factual, citing engineering codes, and sent it to every HOA email address, copied Brenda, and dropped a hard copy into their mailbox. Their response: silence. Days later, I snuck up there myself after the crew left. The surface was already showing gullies from runoff, no proper soil compaction, no drainage channels, just naked, exposed, volatile dirt. I called the contractor, a man who sounded like he was chewing gravel. He hung up on me the moment I mentioned the risk of death. "We follow what the client asks," he snarled. That was the line. I went over their heads. I drafted a letter to the county building and safety department, flagging the entire area as high risk due to unauthorized grading. I uploaded all my evidence. The next morning I received a violation notice for my mailbox color. It was taupe. The day after, a board member stood on my lawn and took photos of my house, smiling like I was a crime scene. It was psychological warfare, but I had a foot in the door. A junior inspector, a young guy named Roger, finally came out. I gave him the binder, the coffee, the silent prayer. He looked up at the slope, nodded and said, "Yeah, that looks not great." I pointed out the cracks, the gouge. He promised to escalate it. A week passed, then another. Meanwhile, the slope got worse. The rains came early, short bursts of thunder, leaving rivulets streaming down the exposed clay. I saw the dirt start to sag. Brenda, meanwhile, was thriving. Posting. Photos of the inspiring revitalization on the community portal, angled perfectly to avoid showing the erosion. People commented with heart emojis. I felt like I was losing my mind, watching a loaded gun pointed at my family, and I was the only one who heard the safety click-off sound of a low, deep rumble returns, followed by an anxious breath. I knew I was running out of time, so I doubled down. I contacted the local news. I called an old army buddy now with FEMA, just for a hypothetical what happens when a private HOA project triggers a landslide. His answer chilled me. Best case, lawsuits. Worst case, body bags. And still, Brenda and her board stayed silent, waiting for the hill to speak louder than I could. That's what HOA power structures do. The louder the voice of authority, the less accountability it carries. I installed my own rain gauge, water sensors, and a vibration monitor behind the house. I mailed a duplicate hard drive of all my evidence to my cousin out of state. I wasn't just preparing for a landslide anymore, I was preparing for a cover-up. Because when that hill came down, Brenda would lie, the board would lie, and they would bury the truth right, along with whatever was left of my house. It happened at 3:47 a.m., not the landslide yet. That came later. What happened at 3:47 was the sound of deep, low, wet growl, a shift like the earth exhaling under unbearable strain. It was the sound of pressure releasing, the kind I only heard once, just before a ridge collapsed on my unit in a remote valley. I bolted upright. I went to the window. The vibration sensor was blinking an angry, unbroken red pulse. I slipped on my boots, grabbed my flashlight, and saw it, a jagged trench through the terrace they had cut. The crack was wider, deeper. I documented everything, emailed it to the HOA, the county, and the news desks. I didn't care about their community standards anymore. Sound of typing. Then a phone notification. Brenda replied at sunrise. Not to the report, but to issue another warning. Mr. Jensen, spreading unverified panic is a serious violation. You are to cease all independent surveying and communications. Your behavior has been noted. Noted. Like I was a kid vandalizing a park bench. The rain started just before midnight, a slow, ominous patter. By 2:19 a.m., the sensor was a solid stream of red. I grabbed my flashlight, rushed outside, and aimed it up the slope. And for the first time, I saw it. The entire section of soil above the terrace bulged. The mountain was holding its breath. At 2:34 a.m. I made the first of 3 calls. The first was to my army friend, Colonel Marlowe. "It's happening," I said. "Movement confirmed. Slope is bulging. If this rain holds, it's coming down." He was silent for half a second. "Send me your files. I'll initiate the alert chain." The second call was 911. The operator's tone shifted the moment I said, "Slope failure in progress." The third call was to the HOA emergency line. I left a message.com/clinical. "Evacuate the lower properties. You have 15 minutes. You ignored the warnings." Then I woke Clara. She didn't ask questions. She had been sleeping with her shoes next to the bed for a week. We loaded the truck at 3:05 a.m. The ground gave a soft, final tremble. And then came the noise. Not thunder, not a crash, a roar. A deep, bottomless sound like the earth tearing itself in half. I looked in the rearview mirror as the river of mud, trees, and rock broke free and swallowed our entire backyard. The shed By 3:30 a.m. the fire engines were there. By 4 a.m. the first unit of the National Guard landed in the empty lot by the community center. Brought in by helicopter because the roads were already blocked, Clara and I sat in the truck, watching it all unfold. Our home was gone, the entire rear wall caved in by a wall of sludge and broken timber. My deck, my quiet place, simply washed away, and Brenda, nowhere, not until daylight broke. I saw her across the street, in a silk bathrobe and slippers, soaked through, staring at the destruction. Not panic, not guilt, just disbelief, like she'd watched a magic trick she hadn't agreed to. She looked across the road at me. Our eyes locked. I didn't wave. I didn't nod. She looked away first. The mayor declared a state of emergency. 9 homes damaged or destroyed. Miraculously, no one was killed, though 2 were hospitalized. The news vans arrived by noon. I gave them everything, the photos, the sensor logs, the emails, the warning letters I'd sent the HOA. I explained exactly how this disaster had been avoidable. Every single report ended the same way. Resident warned, HOA warnings ignored. Slope collapse. The HOA issued a generic statement. Our hearts go out to the families affected by this unfortunate natural event. Natural event. I wanted to scream. I drove to City Hall armed with my binder, and using Colonel Marlowe's name, they let me in. I laid out the ignored warnings, the lack of permits for major grading, the falsified claims of stability. An hour later, I was shaking hands with a woman from the district attorney's office. "Mr. Jensen," she said, "I think we're going to need you to testify." I nodded. "I was hoping you'd say that." The investigation opened immediately. The contractor was subpoenaed. Brenda was photographed entering City Hall with an attorney, wearing sunglasses like a celebrity caught in a scandal. That's when the community finally shifted. People who had avoided me, who feared Brenda's fines, started showing up. One neighbor, Steve the surveyor, who had quietly helped me map the grade, returned my maps, his face etched with shame. "I should have said more," he muttered. "It's not too late," I told him. "There's still truth to dig out." A full-scale emergency response replaced the chaos. As the National Guard stabilized the remaining slope, the HOA made one last desperate, ridiculous move. They issued an online communication blaming the landslide on unapproved private alterations to storm barriers, hinting directly at the sandbags I had placed to save my family. They were blaming me, but the narrative was collapsing. Clara showed me her phone. The neighborhood message board was exploding. Residents were posting their own doorbell camera footage and screenshots of Brenda dismissing their concerns. That people were finally waking up. I wrote a 4-page statement for the DA's office. A clear, direct timeline of willful negligence. That night, Colonel Marlowe called me. "You're not going to believe this." The HOA filed their own report, claiming their project was sabotaged by a disgruntled homeowner, but they listed the wrong timestamp for the collapse. It doesn't match the city's seismic data. "We've got them." They were exposed. The city held an open forum. It was meant to discuss recovery, but it turned into a reckoning. Over 100 residents, half in muddy boots, the other half with cold anger in their eyes. Steve, the surveyor, stood up. "I warned them too," he said, holding up a soaked, smudged grade map we had drawn. "I kept quiet because I didn't want to get fined, but I'd rather lose a mailbox than my soul." The room erupted. When Brenda finally appeared, flanked by her attorney, she was met not with gears but a wall of cold, quiet contempt. She tried to speak, but the microphone didn't work, and nobody was listening anyway. 2 board members resigned that day. Weeks later, I was in a wood-paneled room giving my formal deposition. The key evidence: a text message from a board member, months earlier. "Should we get a proper engineering report before we dig?" Brenda's reply: "No time. We'll deal with pushback later. Once it's built, no one can undo it." I watched the city attorney's jaw tighten. "This is negligence," he said. "Documented, deliberate negligence." "No," I replied. "This is sabotage dressed up as progress." The civil case verdict was swift, liable on all counts. Gross negligence, willful misconduct, retaliation. Brenda Cross and 2 board members were referred for criminal charges. The community demanded a full HOA charter revision. They rewrote the rules from the ground up. Mandatory public forums, tighter checks, and a 2/3 vote required for any major project. Steve was elected president by a landslide. I declined a seat on the panel. I'd fought enough. Months later, Clara and I stood on the rebuilt edge of our lot. The fragile slope was replaced by a massive, steel-reinforced retaining wall, permitted and engineered to the letter. It rose out of the earth like a clean, strong spine. It wasn't just a wall. It was a line in the ground, drawn not by fear, but by resolve. They even built a small memorial garden behind it, a bench and a plaque. It read, "This ground gave way so others could stand stronger. Let us never ignore a warning again." Clara touched the plaque, smiled faintly, and whispered. They finally listened. We hadn't just rebuilt a house. We had reclaimed our dignity, our agency, our voice. They tried to bury us under politics and policy, and when that didn't work, they tried to let the land finish the job. But the land didn't bury us. It exposed them. And honesty, hard-won and brutally exposed, is a foundation you can build on. Soundofwindinthetrees.com atmosphere. Brenda Cross sold her house and vanished. She never apologized. Except, one afternoon, months after the trial, I received a letter. No return address. Inside, a folded sheet in neat handwriting. "You were right. I was wrong. I will live with it every day. I hope you and your daughter find peace." No signature, but I recognized the handwriting. It wasn't closure, but it was close. And sometimes, that's enough. I stood there with Clara looking at the wall. "Do you regret fighting them?" I asked. She leaned against my shoulder. "Never. We walk away from our lot now, knowing the road ahead is finally clear. But the question remains, for all of us in these little kingdoms called HOAs, in these communities built on shaky ground, what is the real cost of silence? And who in your neighborhood is currently paying it? Let me know in the comments below. What's the craziest power trip you've ever seen? An HOA or a local official pool? Do you think the new board will last? And what kind of justice do you think Brenda Cross really deserved? Drop a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of the truth coming out of the rubble. Fades to silence.